After a relatively successful opening round of the 2026 season, Ferrari know they have a substantial amount of work left to do to catch up to the almighty Mercedes outfit, particularly on the engine side of things. And with that in mind, we have some news which is broken this morning from Auto Racer, as always with Ferrari, which announced they are building a new engine, not only for an eye and view on 2027, but if the right conditions are met for 2026, we will see it later this season. Of course, this all comes on the back of the numerous months now or weeks of speculation surrounding not only the Mercedes but also the Red Bull Ford engines and the compression ratio trick. Not only that, throughout the Australian Grand Prix weekend, we could see firsthand through videos on YouTube and through our own eyes and ears watching the race, Mercedes have a substantial advantage when it comes to energy management of their power unit over that of Ferrari's current one. And with that in mind, it is interesting to note that this current engine in the SF-26 is considered a transitional one. And I think we've learned why that is the case. So without further ado, let's jump right in and begin to discuss what Ferrari are looking to achieve with a new engine. And really, it all comes down to what we saw and was confirmed throughout the Australian Grand Prix weekend, particularly from FP3 onwards. Mercedes began to show what everyone in the paddock and around the globe connected to Formula One suspected, that Mercedes had a powerhouse of an engine which they hadn't revealed at any point during pre-season testing, and that turned out to be the case. They not only have a major advantage in top speed, which we saw in qualifying, with them having over 10 kilometers an hour advantage over that of their closest rivals in top speed, but also a superior energy management system through their engine and the software they have. And we can compare just how important the engine software and how you actually train the AI part of that software to actually learn what it needs to. Let's look at Ferrari, Mercedes, and the Mercedes customer team in McLaren. Now, what we can see is there's a completely different energy management from Mercedes versus the other two teams. Particularly in turn 1, Mercedes never entertained the thought of entering gear 8. They have a lower top speed, which means they are also starting the lap with less application time on full throttle and thus use less energy to utilize later around the lap. That also means they have to do less harvesting at critical areas later on in sector 1. Now if we go to turn 6, there is a minimal amount of LECO for Mercedes, having utilized saving the energy earlier in the lap. This thus then gives them a huge advantage in terms of the maximum top speed they have at the end of sector 2, 10 kilometers an hour more, but also they have less super clipping at the end of the back straight. This just shows the importance of teaching your machine learning, your artificial intelligence within the system software, what it needs to do. Now, part of that comes down to them having a huge amount of knowledge and experience with successful engines. We saw this when we look at their customer teams. They are minutes away at the end of the race from being anywhere close to Mercedes. So partly it is to do with software that is governing the recovery of the energy that can be utilized around the lap every lap. And with these aspects in mind, and with the shortcomings Ferrari have learned that they had in qualifying and in the race, that is one aspect that they need to pay close attention to and to make sure they improve upon with the next iteration of Ferrari engine for this season. Not only that, I think they need to work on boosting the top end speed that they have within their power unit. And of course, we cannot forget the compression ratio trick. That's something I'm sure the engineers will be working on introducing for this power unit when it is introduced in 2026, if the right conditions are met. And now, what are those conditions? Well, of course, it is all to do with the token system in place for 26 for all the engine manufacturers that are behind the leading engine of the year. Essentially, we know that it's Mercedes, and it is about making sure or hoping they fall within the parameters set by the FIA. And as we all know, it is around the 3% mark. If there is a deficit of 3%, they, after 6 rounds, if I'm not mistaken, are allowed to begin to introduce the next specification of their 26 engine. And those are the conditions Ferrari hoping they fall within. But there is an interesting aspect to this. It's one Ferrari alluded to with Fred Vasseur, Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton. They don't necessarily believe Mercedes showed their true hand in the race. And that is where it all is coming from, right? If Mercedes have enough of an advantage where they finish just ahead of the leading car behind them, in this case it looks like Ferrari, and the gap is not that big, it's maybe a couple of seconds or between 1 and 10 seconds, that means Ferrari will never get the opportunity to introduce their next round of engine because they will not fall within that 3% deficit. So there's all of these games and cat and mouse games being played internally between the teams and the FIA, making sure their advantage in Mercedes' aspect stays an advantage and Ferrari trying to gain an advantage. So you might see interesting things at play where Ferrari lower their engine power and they say, oh my god, we have a major deficit to that of Mercedes, you need to let us introduce a new engine. And then what will happen? Mercedes will play the same trick. They will take power out of the engine, maybe lower the recovery rate that they can have in an optimum setting to close and bridge that gap back down. So those are the kind of crazy aspects that will always be in play. And I think that is something the FIA have overlooked with the regulations and how they've written them. Now, with all of this being said, if they can't do it in this season, they will do it for next season. But a lot hinges on what the FIA do with the compression ratio trick. Will it be allowed for 2027? If so, they will introduce it onto that next engine for next season and beyond. But I have a sneaky suspicion that will be the case because, of course, the cars, the manufacturers in this sense, are the ones governing the rules and regulations that we currently have, particularly so with Mercedes. But what I can say is Ferrari definitely are the leading team behind Mercedes to mount a title challenge to them and to be their closest competitors. They have a fantastic chassis and aero and mechanical platform in the SF-26, and all they need is to improve upon the energy management aspect and of course a little bit more top end. If they can achieve that and they meet the right conditions and are able to introduce a new engine in 2026, we could be in for an absolutely titanic championship battle between all 4 drivers across the 2 teams. And I would absolutely love to see that.